Welcome to Secured with Dr. KJ, the podcast where we break down cybersecurity, the technologies driving it, and the companies shaping our digital future. I'm your host, Dr. Kenneth Johnson, cybersecurity leader, technologist, and strategist. Cybersecurity isn't just an IT concern, it's a business imperative. Each episode, we'll explore key topics like cloud security, zero trust, AI-driven defense, and more. We'll assess how tech leaders are adapting, where they need to improve, and what it takes to stay ahead of evolving threats. This podcast features expert insights from security professionals, industry leaders, and technologists, offering real-world solutions to modern cybersecurity challenges. Whether you're a business leader, security expert, or just curious about how technology keeps us safe, this podcast is for you. Subscribe and join the conversation as we explore cybersecurity's biggest challenges, securing tomorrow, one episode at a time. Today, I'm excited to welcome Dan Menicucci to the show. Dan is a National Solution Engineering Manager for Microsoft Security Business in the financial services, where he helps some of the world's most complex organizations strengthen their cyber resilience. He previously served as Microsoft's Chief Security Advisor for both financial services and education, advising leaders on strategy and security architecture. Before joining Microsoft, Dan spent more than 2 decades in higher education, taking on leadership roles as an enterprise architect, cloud architect, and a chief technology officer. His career has been defined by deep commitment to guiding organizations through complex security challenges with both confidence and clarity. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, KJ. It's great to be here.
Yeah, let's jump right into it. So, education institutions are increasingly being targeted by cyber threats. So why do you think this sector has become a prime target, and how are attackers evolving their tactics?
It's a great question. And I think when you talk to different industries, they probably all assume they're the most attacked industry of all. And, education by Microsoft's measures is often like the top 2 most attacked industries of all. Last year, from our threat intelligence view, we saw education attacked over 20% of the time. When customers come to Microsoft, they bring their data, they bring their end users, they bring their adversaries. And, Microsoft, we're hosting, a lot of the world's data now. And so we get to see a lot of those threat actors and who they're attacking. And right now, 21% of the time, those threat actors are going after education. The surprise reason, or maybe the reason that people aren't thinking about immediately why education is attacked so often, it's not for the curriculum, isn't the reason the threat actors are targeting education. It's, who their business partners are. Higher education universities, they're doing consulting on politics. They are doing government research. They might be doing classified data research. And educations are often a softer target than the sources of that data. And so, if a nation state is coming in and they want to find out, how are discussions going about, the Ukraine war or something, they might target a university in hopes to find some information there rather than going directly at the government. Similar with the government research, that data, and it comes in all forms, unclassified, controlled unclassified, and fully classified, ends up a lot of universities for research, and it can be a softer target. And that's sort of the reality. I think education has improved a lot in their security standards and sort of balancing academic freedom with protecting user data, but they're not as rigid as most enterprises. And so the reality is they probably are a softer target, which makes them very attractive to the threat actors around the world.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that keeps popping into my head as you say that, Dan, is budget, right? When you say softer target, I think in budget, because they have a cycle, they have to hit their budget, and most likely, of course, like with any negotiation, they want to reduce the spend, especially in security or IT in general, right? So is that something that you have seen become real prevalent over the course of your time dealing with educational institutions?
Yeah, I think the budgets aren't even close, to some of the enterprise customers that I work with today. Like the size of the security departments are just a fraction. And, I worked at different universities. We had, between students, faculty, and staff, over 100,000 people that we were serving with, an IT and security budget and team that's probably 5% of, some of the customers that I work with today. So there's limitations in what you can do. And balancing that with, what's the mission of a university is education, research, learning, being open. And so you have faculty and researchers that don't want to be constrained by security controls, and they'll fight quite hard that, hey, we need to, have the ability to transfer data, at 100 gigabits to our neighboring institutions and share all this data without controls and restrictions and firewalls, because that's going to add latency. It's going to slow us down. And so there's constraints with budget is certainly a part of it, but there's cultural constraints as well that you have to work through. And they have valid points. And so you have to sort of balance, how do we make sure that our researchers can be effective while making sure that we're doing a good job of keeping things secure?
Nah, that's great. I think it kind of, it's a tough balance when you have people that want to secure, people that just want to get their job done, and then you have the students, right, that are doing anything and everything under the sun that tax the network as well. So I think that is and especially I also think about the NIL, right, the name, image, and likeness that has come out recently in the last couple of years with student athletes. I think that is probably another thing, because it's driving more traffic towards those universities, right? Not necessarily just towards those individuals themselves, but the universities. So, which then hampers people want to tear that down, because we have the attackers and attackers out there that are, really trying to go for that money. So that's interesting, of how you say that. So when you think about this, and we think about balancing cybersecurity with the open academic environments and how it is tricky. So what strategies have you seen succeed when it comes to protecting sensitive data while maintaining accessibility for students, faculty, and researchers?
I think it all sort of starts with, what are you trying to protect, and what's the risk involved if you don't do a good job of it, right? Like, if it's the cafeteria lunch menu leaks out, obviously no real impact to the university or to students or anyone else. And, there's a gamut of, what the consequences could be around handling of different types of sensitive data. Some have legal consequences, some have, financial and reputational impacts. And so I think that's the first part to sort of put in context. Most universities started in a place where they were highly decentralized. Every department hired a smart group of IT people to build out their identity, their network, their email environments. Everything that department needed was done in-house. I think that made sense at a time. I think, there's a couple strategies that I think make sense now for higher educations to think about at this point. I think some centralization is needed, and I think it's needed for some of the core services, core security services, things like identity, making sure that identities are provisioned properly when people come into the university. They're given access to only the things that they need, and that goes away at the end. I think if you try to ask 100 departments to manage the life cycle of all of their accounts properly, it's going to be too big of a cost burden. Some are going to do it great, some are not going to do it so great, and I think that's going to lead to security risk. And so identity is one example. Network is another one where I think some centralization is needed. Core collaboration services, your email environment, file sharing, things like that, all become better when centralized. Now, for the other types of data, I think it depends. And what I've seen is when you sort of get into the data handling for things that have real consequences if they're leaked. what we did at places that I worked previously is started to build out enclaves, and the cloud actually provided a great place to do that, right? Like it was an empty data center where we could build the network and security controls in a way that we could bring our researchers in, we could bring our grad students in, they could do whatever they needed to while working inside that enclave, but we locked it down in a way where they couldn't pull the data out. And so we avoided a lot of risk of data exfiltration, whether accidentally or intentionally. And that was appropriate. Now, certainly more costs to doing it that way, but when you're starting to get into the CUI type of data, some HIPAA data, those became some great strategies to allow, for research patterns and others in a way that sort of reduced risk for the university and allowed people to, have the access that they needed.
No, that's really good. And so then when you think about, training, right, to ensure that they, students, teachers, everybody else alike is adhering to the proper rules and stuff, like how effective is that, like for that type of diverse group, right?
I think regardless of where you're at, training and user education is the most important chain or link in the security chain, but it's also the most challenging, right? When we first started doing phishing education, we sent out, I think it was an Amazon sort of scam. About 60% of the people that we sent it to failed, and they clicked through and they got the teaching moment that said, hey, this is how you should recognize that this is a malicious email. And I think we waited a week or two and we sent the exact same email out. And 60% of, when we sent it out the second time, it only went to the people that failed.
Right.
So like 60% of the people that failed the first time failed a second time on the exact same message. So it's challenging, obviously, but it's important. We do things, remind people not to write down creds, don't reuse passwords.
Right.
We love our users and we know that, it's hard to come up with a unique password for every service. And that's why I think a lot of the industry has given up on the idea that we can protect passwords. It doesn't matter how strong your password is. You still have end users that are doing silly things. And so the world's a better place if we can just move to passwordless, passkeys and these other things and sort of eliminate some of the human side of that risk. Now, you saw it in other places, but, we certainly tried a lot of user education. We had Cybersecurity Awareness Month in October where we did a lot of things. And it certainly improved things. And, our phishing stats got better over time, but it was sort of disappointing at the same stroke where, you send the same bad message to a user twice and they fail both times. So.
No, I remember doing that type of test in the military. And it's about the same percentage you see, and it's a hilarious thing. And I remember I was dating at the time, and the lady I was dating failed both times, and I was like, that doesn't look good from a semantic standpoint. Like I want, I would love for you to not fail, but life is life, and people take the information in as they see it. So, but they are definitely getting better at making phishing. I mean, you think that's 15, 20 years ago when we were doing these attacks or these honeypots, so to speak, for our people. So pretty interesting. So then as we further this and we look at ransomware to phishing attacks, right? So what role does public and private collaboration play in defending educational institutions, and what more can be done to help?
Yeah, I think no matter how big any institution is, it's a bigger problem than any one company can solve, right? Like if you look at Microsoft, we a couple years back, I think after SolarWinds said, hey, we're going to invest $20 billion over 5 years in cybersecurity. With our own incidents that we have, we have 34,000 people inside of the company working on cybersecurity. Seeing trillions of signals every day. I think the number is over 84 trillion signals a day, something crazy like that.
Yeah.
And even Microsoft would come out and say, like, look, when you have these, Midnight Blizzard and Storm 05558, nation state threat actors, we're going to do our part, but this needs to be everybody's responsibility, and there needs to be information and threat sharing. And so higher education is, are part of that as well, or K through 12s. And they've done a good job, with REN ISAC, Internet 2, EDUCAUSE. There always has been good threat sharing between institutions, but I don't think there's been enough between the public and private sector in that space. And I think it's been mostly the just the educational institutions sharing amongst each other. But I think there is a huge opportunity for the Microsofts of the world, the Palo Altos, CrowdStrikes, security researchers and government agencies to also be sharing insights there to make everybody stronger. I know there's a lot of work that's happening to try to improve that. And so I think it can only get better. I think everybody understands the importance of continuing the conversation. But there's certainly places where, things are seen for the first time. I think QR phishing was actually an example of this. QR phishing was a really big problem last year for a lot of the industry. And that actually popped up in education first back in 2023. So they were sort of the bellwether for QR attacks, where the thought is that some of these malicious threat actors were testing it out there before they started to hit enterprises. So it would have been beneficial for more of the private sector to be paying attention to what was going on there.
Yeah, no, I mean, if it's hitting you guys first before it's hitting everyone else, which makes sense, and it goes along with the theme of what you've been saying, like, hey, we're a weak and soft target, right? So if you're a weak and soft target, which is what attackers go for, hey, we just want to get in, right? And then turn around. That's pretty alarming, actually. And it's something I think we need to, probably put a little bit more energy in, right? So hopefully down the road we can get it all right, and we can all work together from, doesn't matter the cloud, doesn't matter the on-prem company, and we can all just work together and really drive towards a harmony of just stopping these things. And instead of the ransomwares and the phishing attacks siphoning millions and billions of dollars, it's $1 billion business, right? And I had asked on a previous episode, I had asked a CISO, and I said, did you know that these criminals, they have families too, and that's they're trying to do this for their livelihood, right? But we still, what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong, right? We shouldn't have to steal. I think we just kind of ended at that, and I think we need to come together and figure this out as a unit, as a team. So I'm a big sports guy, so teamwork makes the dream work for me. So, but I would love, Dan, definitely appreciated this conversation. I would love your final thoughts and what you would want to give the audience in terms of furthering security in the educational space.
I think my closing statement would probably be the same to any institution. When you look at what's happening in cybersecurity, you always look at these really novel attacks and think, how do we need to pivot our whole program to defend against these things? The reality is most breaches are results of, attacks against some of the basics, vulnerability management. There's far too often where we see unpatched piece of software exposed to the internet that led to, some data loss. Identity attacks, the same thing, password spray attacks, people, reusing simple passwords, inconsistent use of MFA, and attackers have gotten better at attacking MFA with notification spam and other things. And so it's important to be paying attention to identity, as well as vulnerability management, as well as your email environment. And I think, if you can do a great job with those three things, you're going to do a lot to preventing any sort of cyber attacks. And once you get great at those, then you can go figure out the novel things. But doesn't make any sense to worry about the novel things until you've done those basics well.
I couldn't agree more, my friend. And thank you very much for joining the show, and looking forward to having you back on in the future here.
Yeah, absolutely. This was great. Appreciate it, KJ.
Thank you. That wraps up today's episode of Security with Dr. KJ. A big thank you to Dan Menicucci for sharing his insights on the unique challenges education faces in cybersecurity. From balancing openness with protection, to tackling budget constraints, to the importance of collaboration across public and private sectors. If there's one key lesson to leave you with, it's this: the basics still matter. Strong identity practices, effective vulnerability management, and consistent MFA can do more to protect institutions than chasing every new threat vector. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, share this episode with your network, and check out the past episodes for more expert perspectives on cybersecurity. Until next time, securing tomorrow, one episode at a time.